To see all of you today. All right, let's get started. So closed captioning is available in English and Spanish. English closed captions are available within Zoom and YouTube. And users can follow the link below to view both English and Spanish captions in a separate browser window. How to access closed captions. At the bottom middle of your screen, you should see a menu of options. If you can't see the menu, hover your mouse over the bottom middle of the screen. Then click on the CC icon and a separate window with captions will appear. In an effort to continue to center equity, there is an ASL interpreter in addition to closed captioning. To make sure the interpreter is always visible, please right-click their video and select Spotlight Video. For those watching on YouTube, when we screen share, you will be able to see the slideshow, closed captioning, and the ASL interpreter. You will still be able to hear different people speaking, but may not see them. For public input, there will be an opportunity to provide brief public input later in the meeting today, around 9:50 a.m. Verbal public comment will be welcome in the Zoom webinar during the designated time with the option to turn on your camera. Please use the link located in the meeting description on the YouTube meeting page or on the IBR CBAG meeting webpage. Commenters will not be allowed to share their screens and will be removed from the room once the public comment period concludes. To comment by phone, please dial 1-646-931-3860 or 408-638-0968. You can then enter meeting ID 823-5803-3783 with the passcode 385815. Please then dial *9 to raise your hand. After you are invited to speak, dial *6 to unmute yourself. For our emergency procedures, our office is located on the second floor of the building, and we are currently in conference room 25B at 500 Broadway Street, Suite 200, Vancouver, Washington. In the event of an emergency, immediately call 911 to ensure that help is on the way. If you are trained and it's necessary, please provide CPR, AED assistance, or first aid. Equipment, including 2 first aid kits and AEDs, is available in the kitchen. There are 5 fire extinguishers located throughout the office, in the kitchens, at the copy room, near the lockers, in conference room 4, and close to the restroom by West Stairs A. For evacuation, please use the primary routes through West Stairs A and B or East Stairs. Stay calm and wait for emergency responders in a designated safe location. Familiarize yourself with these procedures and equipment location to ensure safety for all. In the event of an evacuation after exiting the building through West Stairs A and B or East Stairs, please proceed to the designated gathering location. This is situated at the corner of East 5th and East 6th Street, directly in front of Bank. As we engage with one another, it's essential to prioritize our relationships and stay focused on our common goal. We must be aware of power dynamics and strive to create a space that respects multiple truths and norms. Let's approach our interactions with kindness and bravery, committing to examine and challenge racially biased systems. This is a learning space for everyone. Actively look for learning opportunities. Virtual participants should keep their cameras on to foster a shared presence. We also want to utilize tools like written notes, the raise hand and speak features to stay engaged. Take care of your personal needs and inform the facilitator if you need to step away. Embrace diverse perspectives and understand that disagreement is healthy. We encourage those who often speak to listen more and those who listen to speak up, always assuming and showing good intentions. I'm now going to pass the floor on to Greg, followed by Mayor Ann, and then Commissioner Max if he is joining us virtually.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Greg Johnson, IBR Program Administrator. Just want to say welcome. We have been meeting for now, I think, 6 months. We've got some good things conference. We have some more things to get done. So we're going to be talking about mobility benefits today. So think big picture, but welcome everyone.
Good morning, Ann McInerney Ogle, Mayor for the City of Vancouver. Greg, it's good to have you home for a little bit.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much. We're looking forward to a nice, healthy conversation and on the presentation for the tribal government consultation. And as Greg pointed out, having a discussion about mobility and accessibility.
And hi, folks. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we
Yes.
can.
Well, great. I apologize for not being there in person today. I have some logistical challenges I'm navigating this morning. Very delighted to be here. Glad to get down to work. So I'll just turn the floor back to the folks in the room who are driving the bus.
Thank you so much. We're now going to move into our introductions, and we're going to start virtually, which my colleague Emily will facilitate. Then we'll move to the in-person room. So to get started, please introduce your name, organizational affiliation, and or at-large status and pronouns. And then we're going to also ask a check-in question. Is there a story behind your name? So let's get started virtually.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. Good morning. I'm going to pull down the slides so that we can all see each other virtually here. So I will start us off. My name is Emily Thomas Peralta. I'm with the IBR Equity and Community Benefits team. And I don't really think there's a good story. I wish there was a great meaning or something behind my name. I think my mom just picked it out of a baby book, gave me some unique spelling, but my middle name is after my grandmother. So I guess there's some meaning behind that. So I'll kick it over to Jonelle, my co-facilitator. And then after that, I would ask all of our CBAG members who are here virtually to please raise your virtual hand so that we can call on you after Jonelle. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. John L. Bell, he, him pronouns, and I serve as co-facilitator of the CBAG as well as principal equity officer for IBR. I am named after my uncle on my dad's side, who my mom was quite fond of. I did not get a chance to meet him, but apparently he made quite the impression. So turn it back over to you, Emily.
Thank you very much. So let's go with Scott and then Farley.
Hey everybody, my name is Scott McCallum. I'm the superintendent of the Washington State School for the Blind, and I don't think there's a story behind my name. Sorry, I'm kind of boring.
Hi, everybody. I'm Farley Winters. I'm with LSW Architects. I'm an architect and associate principal at the firm. My story behind my name is I'm named after Farley Mowat, who is a Canadian author and naturalist. My parents were reading his book, multiple of his books while my mom was pregnant, and they didn't know my gender. So I was going to be Farley either way. They changed the spelling to make it, in their opinion, a little bit more feminine. And I've been Farley ever since. And I've never met another female Farley. So if you know any of them, send them my way. And my pronouns are she, her. Morning, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's go to Tom and then Michael.
Navigating my mute. My name's Tom Hickey. I'm with the North Portland Neighborhoods, and I sit on the Citizens Advisory Group. My full name, Thomas J. Hickey. I'm named after two of my great-grandfathers, William Thomas and Philetus J. And I've always been a little bit sad that they didn't name me Thomas Philetus, because I thought that'd be pretty cool. And that's my story.
My name is Michael Strauss, with Kimco Realty, owner of the Jansen Beach Center, representing our shopping center, other property and retail shopping center owners, as well as small and large retail businesses across Hayden Island. Story with my name is that my parents had planned that if there was a boy, he was going to be Andrew. If there was a girl, it was going to be Michelle. My identical twin brother, Andrew, came out first. So we converted to
Oh,
Michael.
wow.
Yeah. Those were wild times back in the 70s. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go with Darcy and then Commissioner Metz.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Darcy Hoffman, she, her pronouns. I am with Workforce Southwest Washington. And I also don't have a great story behind my name. My parents just liked it. I know when I was little, I was very angry about it because when we went on vacation, I couldn't find anything like with my name on it. You might be able to now, but you couldn't do that. You couldn't then. But yeah, no real story.
I guess I'm up. I feel like this question was written for me. I was named after Charles Mingus, who was a jazz musician. And shortly before I was born, my father was in a bar and bumped into Charles Mingus, and they spent an evening drinking and eating strawberries, as the legend goes. And I think that was a powerful moment for my dad. So Charles Mingus's last name became my first.
Great, thank you so much. Let's go to Vicky and then Peter.
Good morning. my name's Vicky Nakashima. I use she, her pronouns. My story goes, I'm named after my uncle Victor, and in Japanese, there's no V sound. So I grew up thinking my name was Vicky, because that's as close as Japanese people can find for the sound V.
Okay, I guess that's to me. I'm Peter Fells. I'm with the Alliance for Community Engagement, sometimes known as ACE. Use he, him pronouns. There's kind of an interesting story about my last name, but which I'm not going to get into. But my first name, Peter, the only story I know about it is that my dad really liked that name. And in fact, he had a dog named Peter before he had me.
Awesome, thank you. And then we'll go to Scott, and then if there's any other members virtually that we have not, okay, we'll go to Scott and then Ben, thank you.
Morning all, my name is Scott Sharba. I'm the Development Project Manager at the Vancouver Housing Authority. Use he, him pronouns. Interesting question. I do not believe there is a story behind my name, but I just texted my mom to find out. So I'll report back.
You have to report back then.
Yep. Thanks, y'all.
Ben, go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Sorry for my lack of hand raising. I just did it in real time because I can't find the button. But in any case, Ben Jacobson, I have a representing myself and Jane's Forum, which is started by, or Confluence Project, which was started by my mother. I serve on the board of Confluence right now. I have a salt company here locally in Portland. And I guess the story about my name is, my middle name is Einar, which is my grandfather's name. He was from Norway, and that was given to me as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And I believe we have Steve, if you'd like to introduce yourself and share if you have a story behind your name.
So I'm Steve Barnett. I'm the Tribal Council Chair for the Cowlitz Indian Tribe. My parents were both teachers, so they tried to find a name that was recognizable, but not every student had it. So that's how I got my first name, and my middle name is named after my uncle, who was chair for 25 years.
Great, thank you very much. I will turn it back over to Bree, who will lead us through the in-person introductions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Well, my name is Bree Nicolello. I am a co-facilitator with the IBR CBAG team, and my pronouns are she, hers, and I'm actually named after my dad. My full name is Brianna, which I shortened to Bree because Brianna Nicolello is kind of a mouthful. And my father's middle name is Brian, so I'm very happy to be named after him because I love my dad. Marcus, would you like to go next?
Sure. My name is Marcus Christian Mundy. My first name, Marcus, I was named after my great-grandfather, the Reverend Marcus Mundy. He was born a slave in the mid-1800s, and he finished up as a Methodist minister in North Carolina. And my middle name, Christian, my mother just named me that because she wanted me to act that way. I do the best I can. That's it. Thank you.
Walter Valenta from Portland side. I'm from a long list of Walters on my mom's side. So my mother's brother was Walter, her uncle was Walter, her great uncle was Walter. It goes back. So every generation has a Walter in our side of the family.
My name's Janie Haygood. I'm the chair of the Parks and Rec Advisory Commission, she, her pronouns. So a little bit of a backstory. I grew up in a small town in Idaho and we've just gotten a new doctor. And he performed his first vasectomy on my father, which ended up failing. And of course, he was quite upset that he had performed his first vasectomy on the lawyer, the city lawyer. So and then for years, my brother tried to convince me that I looked like the milkman. But the name came about, I was apparently a very large baby. And so they thought I was a boy because they didn't have ultrasounds. So it was going to be Jamie. And then when I came out and I was a girl, they decided on Janie, named after, I guess there was an actress, Jane Mansfield. But changed it just a little bit. And I've only seen one other person in Vancouver actually spelled the same way as mine.
Carly Francis, I'm the regional administrator for WashDOT here in Southwest Washington. She, her pronouns. I think the story about my name basically is that my parents had talked about names and then the birth certificate was signed and then my dad was like, I've always liked Heather. No offense to any Heathers out there, but the movie Heathers came out sort of in my in my teen space, whatever. So I feel like I dodged a bullet on that one.
Good morning. I'm Raymond's maybe, but my cue card up here didn't say my middle name, which is Gregory. I'm an assistant administrator for the program, standing in for Ryan Winshine, who couldn't be here today. Pronouns are he. But my father's name is Raymond, but Raymond George. I was named after my grandfather, my mom's father, Raymond Gregory. And I think my dad got tired of his own name and maybe his father-in-law's. So he always called me by my middle name, Greg. And everybody who knew me through my father called me Greg. So I responded to both names. I've outgrown that a bit because when Greg's on the program and people are saying Greg, I don't go, huh? So I think I'm safe now, but yeah, dual names.
Holly Williams, she, her, I'm a community member from Arnada, lived here 44 years. My mom named me Holly because she liked that name, very unusual back in the day. But when I was an exchange student in France, the very first night, I'm with my host family, I'm not speaking French very well, and they think my name, Oli, they were just laughing. It's hilarious because in French, you say to children, allez au lit, which means go to bed. No.
Well, good morning, everyone. Greg Johnson, he, him. There's no story behind my first name. My middle name is Carl, so I would say I'm named after Carly, but I'm much older than her. But I was named, my middle name is after my mother's youngest brother.
Good morning, Ann McInerney Ogle and Michelle McInerney Ogle. The Ann has an E on it. That is the Roman Catholic Saint Anne. Unlike others in their family that have the Protestant Anne without the E. The other part of it is the McInerney Ogle, and way back in the 80s, we were experimenting with women's last names. I'm the last McInerney in our clan, so I was the last one born. There are no others, and I decided to keep that name.
Eric Holmes, he, him. First name is pretty run of the mill. Last name seems like it'd be run of the mill. It's actually a truncation of Halver home, which is Swedish heritage. And that part of my family immigrated, they shortened it. And it is remarkable to me how often I have to spell homes for people. Yeah, a lot of like, sure.
Shannon Singleton, my pronouns are she and her. I'm leading the community benefits work here at IBR. My parents actually had a similar different name. There was either it was picking mom's first name and then dad's last name or vice versa. So I was either going to be Shannon Singleton or Courtney McCormick. Which I feel like Courtney McCormick does not look like this. So so I ended up Shannon Singleton, named after the river in Ireland, my mom's first generation.
So we are going to move back into our slides. And can you please put those up? Yeah. Emily, are you able to put the slides back up? Thank you so much. All right, going through our meeting agenda for today. So we've already gone through the first portion, which is our call to order, our welcome and introductions, our meeting overview and outcomes. We are now going to move into the public comment portion of our agenda, then followed by a program update from Administrator Greg Johnson. We'll then have a presentation on the tribal government consultation and section 106, along with a brief Q&A. We'll then have a portion of time to go through the CBAG work plan, followed by a presentation on potential community benefits in mobility and accessibility. We'll then break out into our small groups and have a little brainstorm and recommendation time before coming back together as a large group and then reporting out. And then we'll close with our closing and next steps. We're now going to move into the public comment portion of the period. So I'm going to make sure that everybody here did receive the public comments in their packet for the meeting. We have a couple that were in there. And then I'm now going to ask Robert if we have any members of the public that are waiting to provide comment.
Yes, I'm looking and I do see one comment here.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, for those who are providing public comment, you will have 2 minutes to provide your comment. Please make sure that you press *6 to unmute yourself and provide your name and affiliation. Is our public commenter in the room?
Yes, this is Bob Wortblad. You ready?
Yes, please. Thank you, Bob.
Oh, very good. I'm Bob Wortblad, a Washington resident, 40 years as civil engineer. The IBR has a problem. Its supplemental EIS has been delayed 4 times because federal agencies must have a serious problem with its locally preferred alternative. The bridge is too low for the Coast Guard, too steep and dangerous, too large, ugly, and polluting. Unfortunately, 3 years ago, the IBR issued its tunnel concept assessment that fraudulently disqualified a better solution. This report inflated excavation and dredging 4 times and overestimated costs. My public disclosure request forced the IBR to cut its estimate in half from 8 million to its still inflated 4 million cubic yards. A reasonable estimate is only about 2 million cubic yards. 8 million cubic yards is a massive volume, twice the size of two and a half Hoover dams. But Greg Johnson has dismissed this as an oversight. The IBR sent me an email pleading the idiot defense. They claimed they didn't understand their software. They double counted. They often make mistakes. They would have discovered the mistake in the future, and this massive mistake does not change their decision. A dozen professional engineers listed on this report did not check for reasonableness or a professional engineering staff as required by ethics and state law. Consultants, WSP, and parametrics never put their name on this report. The IBR and their consultants are guilty of fraud or stupidity. In either case, they cannot be trusted to do a fair evaluation of an immersed tunnel. An independent evaluation of immersed tunnel must be done and included in a supplemental EIS. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Wow.
Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Robert, can you please proceed with the meeting? Okay. To submit comments after the meeting, please fill out the comment form on the program website or email your comments to info@interstatebridge.org with CBAG Public Comment in the subject line. You can also call 360-859-0494 if you're in Washington, 503-897-2918 if you're in Oregon, or 888-503-6735 for toll-free, and state CBAG Public Comment in your message. Written comments need to explicitly say CBAG Public Comment in the subject line or in the body of the message for them to be identified and distributed to the CBAG members. All written comments must be received prior to 48 hours in advance of each upcoming meeting in order to be distributed to advisory group members. Comments received after that point will be distributed to members in advance of their next meeting. And I'm going to turn it over to Program Administrator Greg Johnson for a program update.
Thank you. Once again, Greg Johnson, I'll be our program administrator. So the team has been tremendously busy. I do want to address some misnomers that are out there. We have had delays in the release of our draft supplement, but it is not because of bridge height. It is not because of a tunnel, whatever. We are working with our federal partners to make sure that our modeling for traffic is appropriate. And there's been numerous back and forth. We think we are on the path to solution on that issue. But yes, it has delayed us, but it is not because of the reasons stated in the book. So I just want to make that clear. So a couple things that are going on. As this group knows, we have a bi-state tolling subcommittee. That's a subcommittee of the Washington State Transportation Commission and the Oregon Transportation Commission. And they are meeting on a regular basis. They last met this last week to talk about what tolling policy will look like for IBR. So the switch has been made to put Washington State DOT in the driver's seat for pressing tolling, the guts of tolling together, but the policy is being discussed by both states, and we're hoping within 6 to 9 months to have a tolling policy for IBR specifically. So their next meeting will be May 17th. These are public meetings, so anyone can listen and comment. We're still doing community outreach. We are talking to neighborhood associations. We were just at Rose Village, and we were on Hayden Island talking to the neighborhoods there. We are making sure we are still having conversations and making sure everyone knows where we're at. We are in this period of the program where folks are behind the scenes grinding away, trying to get this draft supplemental ready. And so we are, it may appear that nothing is happening, but the team is working furiously on getting this document ready to put out for public comment. So we also attended the Vancouver Spring Tenant event or the Port of Vancouver Spring Tenant event to once again talk to folks who are at the Port of Vancouver about what this program will mean for them in the future. We talked a little bit about the timing release of the draft update. We have a process that's not totally under our control. We have a lot of back and forth with modelers who are local, regional, and national modelers that are looking at a number of different things. So we are working with them. We think we have a path to resolution of the issue that has caused a concern. And we will be giving more updates as that becomes a little more clear. I don't want to put another date out there that folks will say, oh my God, you missed another date. But we will be putting out the new schedule once we have an understanding of where our federal partners are and when we can release the draft supplement. What's on the horizon? We have an Industry Day event coming up on May 6th, where we have contractors and consultants invited to come and talk to the program about how this program could be delivered most effectively and efficiently, getting input. We have things that are draft of what we think is a appropriate way to move forward. But once again, we want to hear from the industry so they can make sure that they are have their voices heard and reflected in what we are doing and how we deliver this program. And last but not least, next Tuesday, the Assistant Secretary for the U.S. Department of Transportation will be in town. He's in town for actually the American Public Transit Association Mobility Conference that's being hosted by TriMet and C-Tran in this area. And so he will be in town, and he's requested a discussion with the IDR team and some of the key partners to talk about the impacts of what this will mean, how this will help grow the economy in this area, and the impacts that it will have on the community. So we're looking forward to that conversation. So with that, I'll take any questions that anyone may have. Yes, Holly.
So I don't want to put you on the spot really, but everybody wants to know, when's the construction going to start? So
our rough schedule is still looking at having groundbreaking late next year, late in 2025. We still have to get through federal processes and get a record of decision before we can expend federal aid dollars on things. But our team is looking at how we can pull some key elements of the program up and get them started in that 2025 time period. So as we get more clarity, we will we'll be publishing a new schedule that talks about when the in-water work window will be hit for the big bridge. But we have a number of other items that can be worked on in advance of that.
Do we have any more other questions virtually or in person? Okay, great. I'm going.
If I can take one last moment, one of the things that the program is also looking at, as many of you know, we've done micro grants for how we message out into the community. We're looking to put together another round of micro grants, but these micro grants will be specifically targeted to workforce and community, and how we can start having community-based organizations work with us to help write grant applications for getting the workforce prepared to help build this program. So look for that in the upcoming months, but this is tied into community benefits that this team has said is important, so.
We do have a question from Eric.
Eric Holmes, City of Vancouver. Just a question relative to the timing of the Bridge Improvement Program grant. Is that still on the trajectory that we were last made aware of?
Yeah, that grant, we applied for it back in late November, early December. And initially it was gonna be released, we thought in April, but the latest we have is gonna be sometime in June. So we're waiting with bated breath as folks may or may not know, we've asked for 1.5 billion from that grant alone. So it's a huge lift, and so we're waiting to see what they say to us.
Okay, I'm gonna pass it on to Emily, and before we get into this section, thank you, Eric, for putting your placard up. I just want to remind our in-person folks that it's helpful if you can put your placard up, so that way we can call on your name and our virtual folks can hear who's speaking. Thank you so much. Emily, please take it away.
Yes, thank you, everyone. We will now move to our next topic, which is a presentation on the tribal consultation and Section 106, so an overview of those processes. So I will invite Cassie Rippey, our tribal liaison, and Haley Reff, our cultural resources program manager, to join us here virtually. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So Cassie Rippey, my pronouns are she, her. I am the tribal liaison for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. And Haley, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hello, Haley Reff, pronouns she, her. I'm the Cultural Resources Program Manager for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. Nice to see you all today.
So we were going to talk to you guys today about really intending to give some introduction to cultural resources, and how this fits within the program. But we wanted to start with we'd heard that there were some questions about how the tribes are being engaged on this program. And so we just wanted to give a kind of high level overview to introduce that, yes, we are consulting with 10 federally recognized tribes on this program. And we also have one non-federally recognized tribe who's engaging as a Section 106 consulting party on the program as well. Tribal consultation is a government-to-government process that's established through federal law, state law, and a number of state processes. Consultation is something that happens on that government-to-government level separately from any public process, but often parallel to those public processes. And one of the things that we wanted to highlight as a key point in that is that engagement with tribal members and members of the Indigenous community as interested members of the public is not the same thing as tribal consultation. So consultation with the tribes happens at that leader-to-leader level. We do coordinate with tribal staff, representatives of the tribal government, but that consultation really happens, with tribal council and with those appointed representatives from the tribal government. So we have a number of meetings with our consulting tribes. We don't really share the details of those meetings in that public forum here, but if there are ever any concerns or questions about that, I'm happy to answer those. You can reach out to me directly. And with that, I think I'm going to just hand it over to Haley to really talk about Section 106 and cultural resources.
Thanks, Cassie. And slide, please. So as Cassie noted, I am going to tell you a little bit about Section 106 at a pretty high level, and then happy to answer any questions that you might have. So Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966, or the NHPA, requires federal agencies to consider the effects on historic properties of projects they carry out, assist, fund, permit, license, or approve throughout the country. If a federal or federally assisted project has the potential to affect historic resources, a Section 106 review will take place. Under Section 106, historic properties are those that are listed or eligible to be listed in the National Register of Historic Places. This means that these properties can be shown to be significant under one or more of the National Register criteria for evaluation as established by the National Park Service and possess sufficient integrity to convey their significance. Slide, please. So Section 106 is a procedural law, so I'm going to go through the overarching steps of the Section 106 process, of which there are 4, and these are outlined by the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, or the ACHP. So step 1, initiating Section 106, the agency identifies who should participate in the Section 106 review. Consulting parties may include the state or tribal historic preservation officer, local governments, an applicant for federal assistance if one is involved, and interested federally recognized Indian tribes or Native Hawaiian organizations, among other groups. Also in this initiation process, we determine and consult on the area of potential effect, which is relating to the map that you see on screen. Once we have established the area of potential effect, then we move into step 2, identifying historic properties. The agency gathers information to decide if any properties in the area that may be affected by the project are listed or eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. Then, if no historic properties are present, or if those present will not be affected by the project, the review may conclude here. However, if there are properties that are identified, we move to the next step, step 3, assessing effects. The federal agency determines if historic properties may be adversely affected in this step. They determine how historic properties might be affected by the project and whether any of those effects would be considered adverse. The agency does so in consultation with other consulting parties as part of the review. Adverse effects are those that diminish characteristics qualifying a property for inclusion in the National Register. Those are represented in our findings of effects, which we'll get into in just a moment on the documents that we've used to move through this process. If there are no potential adverse effects to an historic property, the review for Section 106 may conclude at this stage. But where there are adverse effects, the federal agency needs to work towards achieving a resolution, which brings us to step 4. In step 4, the agency and Section 106 consulting parties work to reach agreement on a resolution for adverse effects. The agency explores measures to avoid, minimize, or mitigate adverse effects to historic properties and reach agreement with the state or tribal historic preservation office and the ACHP on measures to resolve them. A memorandum of agreement or a programmatic agreement records the resolution measures agreed upon to resolve adverse effects. This is developed in consultation and executed prior to approval of the project. Slide, please. For the IBR program specifically, the process for identifying historic properties, step 2 of the Section 106 process, began with baseline survey reports. These reports, which were completed in 2023, evaluated all identified resources within the area of potential effect at a high level in order to gain a preliminary understanding of which resources may be eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places and therefore subject to Section 106. They provided the IBR Cultural Resources team with a pool of potentially eligible properties for further evaluation. Then moving into the Section 106 determinations of eligibility. So resources that advanced from that baseline survey report to receive intensive level of evaluation called determinations of eligibility included those that were previously undocumented and recommended potentially eligible in the baseline survey report, those that the state historic preservation offices had previously determined eligible more than 10 years ago, and those that were recommended as not eligible in the baseline survey report, but that would be fully or partially removed in the course of the undertaking. And then in step 3, as described by the Section 106 process, the IBR program next assessed potential effects on all of those historic properties that were identified within the area of potential effect that are listed in or have been determined eligible for the National Register, either through the Section 106 determination of eligibility or through prior evaluations and nominations. The effect options that you're seeing here on screen are correlating to the options that are available in section 106. So no effect is found where an undertaking will have no effect on a historic property. No adverse effect is found where an undertaking may have an effect on a historic property, but will not alter any of the characteristics of the historic property that qualify it for inclusion in the National Register in a manner that would diminish its integrity. And then an adverse effect is found when an undertaking may alter directly or indirectly any of the characteristics of a historic property that qualify the property for inclusion in the National Register in a manner that would diminish the integrity of the property's location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, or association. And again, adverse effects are then resolved through mitigation, which brings me to the next slide, please. The next step in continuing our Section 106 process is the preparation of a programmatic agreement, or a PA. A programmatic agreement is a type of Section 106 agreement document that is used when a lead agency cannot fully determine how a particular undertaking may affect historic properties or the location of historic properties and their significance and character prior to approving a project. It allows the lead agency or agencies to govern the implementation of a particular agency program or the resolution of adverse effects from complex projects through negotiation of an agreement between the federal agency or agencies, the ACHP, appropriate state and tribal historic preservation offices, and other signatories. A programmatic agreement can establish the roles and responsibilities of the agency and the consulting parties, agreed upon measures to resolve adverse effects, and processes for the phased identification and evaluation of historic properties and protocols for involving stakeholders in consultation as effects are identified and resolved. A concept draft outlining a recommended format and structure of the IBR program PA was distributed to identified Section 106 consulting parties for consultation in September of 2023. Those comments have been considered and are being rolled into our first formal draft of the programmatic agreement. Slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. We are here on the next steps. Great. So our next steps are to develop that first formal draft of the programmatic agreement, which will be published and consulted with our Section 106 consulting parties at this time. We will facilitate conversations around resolving adverse effects to historic properties, and that will be an ongoing discussion throughout the cycle of the programmatic agreement. And of course, the consultation around the programmatic agreement as we work to generate a final draft, and we'll look for scheduled public review later this year. Thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions on Section 106 or cultural resources.
Thank you so much, Haley. So we'll start here with our virtual folks. If members have any questions for either Haley or Cassie, please feel free to raise your hand, and then we will proceed to the in-person room. Okay, well, seeing none for the moment, we'll move over to Bree to see if there are any in person. If folks virtually, something comes to mind, feel free to raise your hand and we'll come back to you.
We have one question over here. So Eric.
Eric Holmes, City of Vancouver. So I was multitasking, I may have missed it. The consulting parties, who are the consulting parties?
Yeah, that's a good point. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you finished with your question, Eric?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's a great question. We have quite a long list of folks who are local governments and other related organizations in the area, such as the Clark County Historical Museum, for example, the Clark County Historic Preservation Commission, the City of Vancouver, in that vicinity. Of course, our 10 federally recognized tribes and several other parties with a vested interest in the Section 106 undertaking. So it's a pretty long list for the IBR program specifically.
And then a separate question, we have this unique collection of very, very prominent historic assets immediately east of the corridor that has a pretty unique set of ownership patterns as well as kind of layers of federal legislation that govern it.
Correct.
How does the 106 process interplay with the 4F process?
That's a great question. And 4F could certainly be a separate presentation for a separate day. But essentially, Section 106 dovetails with Section 4F in that historic properties considered under Section 4F are ones that were identified during the Section 106 process. So Section 4F utilizes Section 106 to identify those resources which are subject to consideration under historic resources for Section 4F. And then an important consulting party that kind of relays into your notation there of the layers of ownership and history, of course, is NPS as well.
And do we anticipate a future session on 4F?
Be happy to do that if you'd like, yeah.
Disrupt the work program.
We can definitely chat about it. I'm sure we can make time.
Okay. And then last question from me. The programmatic, the slides indicate that a draft programmatic agreement is roughly already about now. And is that draft developed in consultation? I'm just showing my ignorance here. Is it developed in consultation with the parties, or does the project develop a draft and send it out and that initiates the consultation?
Great question there too. It is absolutely developed in consultation. So we started with a very bare bones and basic outline of the document, and then from there accepted comments and made a fuller outline with a plain language draft and a more kind of annotated outline where we accepted comments. And then we've moved into this initial first formal draft of the programmatic agreement, which will at this time simply be shared with the Section 106 consulting parties for additional consultation before the next draft is formulated.
Great. Mayor Ann, I'm going to call on you, and I am just going to do a quick time check. We have about 2 minutes for questions.
Ron McInerney, Ogle, Mayor for the City of Vancouver. Could you tell me where the historic reserve, especially the hospital, is? Is that a 4F or a 106?
Both.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Do we have any other questions in the room, either in person or virtually, before we transition to our next agenda item? Okay, we have one more from Eric.
Sorry. Just because we have such a unique collection of ingredients on the historic reserve, it would be great to understand, if not today, then even as a follow-up item, to understand very clearly what the relationship is between 106 and 4F consultation, and kind of who or what process ultimately wins. That's probably not the right word, but I mean, there's some interplay there, and it'd be really good to understand who makes the final call on what aspects of that.
Yeah, so I think
in our unique situation.
That's a really kind of complex and, as you're noting, unique situation. So I think we could probably genuinely talk for about an hour to just answer that question. So I'll try to keep it as brief as I can, but I'm happy to talk about it more offline if it would be helpful as well. But for the most part, so Section 4F would have an official with jurisdiction that relates to that specific property that would be part of that consultation and decision process, whereas Section 106 is a decision process that's made at the federal agency level regarding eligibility and in consultation with all of the consulting parties. So that's a little bit behind kind of where some of those decisions come into play.
That means that.
We'll call it off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Offer, yeah, Ray, maybe. That's what I was gonna offer. Don't know if this is of great interest to the Community Benefits Advisory Group. Then greater, we're happy to bring that back. That if there are specific follow-up meetings we can do offline, we're absolutely happy to do that.
We'll need to do that.
So, yeah, we can.
Thank you so much, everyone. We're going to now move into our next agenda item, which is going to be the CBAG work plan overview.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. We wanted to provide this overview of the work plan and just a reminder. We know we've been meeting for a few months, and we think that it's really helpful to just make sure we're getting a refresher on what the process looks like and how our workflow is going to look. So as a just quick reminder, for the idea is that for each of the different community benefits categories, we will have a few different touch points. So we first have this brainstorm session, which is what we're doing today, where we really want to have the ideas be open, just bring everything you can to it, visioning out what you would like the community to look like at the end of this process under each of these different categories. Then the next touch point, we will take all of those recommendations, work with our teams to do some refinement, some analysis, and then bring that back to the group for further discussion, digging into some more details with members, and then moving into our final touch point, which will be similar to what we did previously, where we will have the votes to move forward the budget recommendations under each category. So we'll have those 3 touch points for each category. And we intentionally built in some time in between each of those stages so that that work can be done behind the scenes, and we can have time to do that analysis and get some of the context that we really need to refine these and make them as effective and as reasonable as possible for putting into action. So we touched on workforce equity and economic opportunity last month. This month we are doing mobility and accessibility. We will come back to that in August for the refinement, and then come back in December for the final recommendation on that category. Similarly, we will move into community benefits category. We will have a reminder about what that category is meant to include. We know that the title is a little bit confusing, but as a reminder, it aligns with our equity objectives and the equity framework. So we will be talking about that next month. After that is avoid further harm, and then physical design. And the months here reflect each of those touch points where we will come back for the different stages under each category. We also wanted to provide a bit of context around what the analysis is really going to look like between these different stages. So as part of the work that our team is doing behind the scenes on these benefits, some of the pieces are around asset mapping. We've met with some of the different program partners. Some of you have participated where we're having conversations around potentially identifying resources or connections between different efforts that partners are doing that really potentially align with our community benefits that we are talking about here. So that is one of the pieces. Another is sorting and filtering. So we know that some of the questions that folks have been around, what are things that are typically part of projects like this? What are things that DOTs typically do that are in the normal scope? What are some things that maybe would be part of Section 106 or potentially conflict with that would need to be reconciled? What are some benefits that would maybe require creating new processes completely? And what would that look like? And then what are some that, program partners or other parties would really need to implement? As we've mentioned, not everything we put forward here can be implemented by DOTs. So it's really identifying what are some of those benefits where we would need partners to put those into action. And so that's some of the assessment that we're doing in that stage between the brainstorming and the refinement, so that we can really bring that context to all of you. And that will help as we further dig into these and get them to a final stage. And so for some of the pieces that would be under the program's purview or for the DOTs to implement, that's the piece where the IBR teams then are going to dig into what is that going to take? What are potential costs and how would that be covered? And then for those that would be like third-party initiatives or partner initiatives, then that's where our partners are going to do some of that assessment and really that understanding around cost. So while we're starting with each category with a brainstorm, we know that there's some potential benefits that others are going to be responsible, as I mentioned, and they might require resources and implementation from these other parties. So we're going to continue keeping this in mind as we do the analysis work and be reflecting that back to all of you as we move into the next phases for each of these categories. And so I'll pause there if folks have any questions that they would like to ask. And we can start with the virtual room. Okay, in-person folks.
Okay, for in-person, we have one question. And I apologize that my face is not visible. We're currently dealing with some technical issues on our end. Our first question is from Holly.
So just a cautionary note on the items that are included in the normal course of business. I'll just use sort of ADA requirements as an example. You know, there are the requirements for ADA, but then that's kind of a bare minimum. And then on top of that, there are things that really truly make the facility really usable for those with disabilities. And we're talking about some of those items, but I just would hope that we don't think, oh, we're ADA, we're good. Because I actually did hear that earlier this week. And substitute that for true usability.
Thank you so much for that. And, you know, that's absolutely what we want to be having in mind. And as part of us being able to identify what are kind of these minimum or these typical, you know, pieces that are included, that's where then we can have discussions around if this group is putting forward recommendations on that piece, where do we want it to go above and beyond, and what could that potentially look like? And so that's exactly the type of dialogue that we're wanting to have, and that context is really going to be helpful for us to understand that of where do we feel like we need to go more than the floor or the baseline. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm gonna have Marcus followed by Carly, and then we'll have time for about one more question after that, because we do need to move into our next agenda item. Marcus?
Yeah, just a very quick question. Earlier in this meeting, we had heard that the groundbreaking is going to take place maybe in late 25. And I'm curious for your timeline on the asset mapping. When is all this going to take place? How condensed a time frame is it to start identifying the resources, identifying the workforce? There's got to be training and education and other things considered as part of this. And I just wanted to know, get some kind of scale or scope of the time frame you have in mind for beginning to end of this process.
I would ask Greg if you had anything that you would like to add here around the timeline piece.
Yeah, this the community benefits is probably going to be a ongoing committee throughout the construction, because there are going to be things that change. We want to have a base set of things that we start implementing. Some things will be in the record of decision in that NEPA document. Some things will see themselves in specifications, similar to what Holly, the question she asked about enhancements to the base of ADA. You may see some of that in design or in specification. So it's a continuum. So certain things will get dropped in and start having conversations of workforce prep work that needs to go on. That's why we're thinking about getting this micro grant started, so we can start identifying strategies to get these things underway. So it's going to be a continuum throughout.
Thank you.
Carly?
It's actually more of maybe a comment, and Greg, you can step on my toes if you need to, but I think this idea, the ADA is a good example here, where there is sort of a baseline, but it's always responding to the environment that it's in, and also is responding to sort of the jurisdiction it's related to. And so I think there's always a dynamic space where that gets developed with like the city and the way that they see and think about that work in their context. And so that may not always look like the bare bones of ADA and needing it, because we're working in concert with like the city. So I would say the Mill Plain corridor is a real great example of that. It was a DOT project, but we worked very closely with the city. There's some places where development folks kind of monkeyed up the works for a minute and we got it fixed, so that's great. But I think there's a space where there is also, not all of that necessarily is always betterments. It's just in working to co-define how that meshes with the existing context that it's in. Now, that may not give you any more additional kind of confidence or trust in it, that we're working with the city or of Portland or Vancouver to do that work, because you may have some concerns there. But I think there's a space in which it will get defined maybe as not, I mean, the bare bones is sort of a very finite category. And so I think there's dialogue that happens there that kind of crafts it, and that ends up maybe not looking, it doesn't look the same, I guess, across the O2 system. Greg, would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I think that's well said and very fair, because we'll work with community groups, with the cities, the jurisdictional folks. We don't want to put something out there that, number one, is not maintainable. And we can put something special out there, and then no one knows how to keep it moving forward, and it will die on the vine. But we want to have something that's reflective of the values of the jurisdictions, the values of the neighborhood communities, and that makes sense for long-term sustainability of that asset that we build.
And specifically, I think the fact that we have such, I mean, there's resources here for folks in the disability community with the School for the Blind, that and so those pieces, you know, granted that's still in context, but what does the system overall look like? And so massive bells and whistles here when the rest of the system doesn't have them is an interesting question to dialogue on, but I think that it's all intended to be reflective of kind of the impacts from dialogue.
Okay, and then we're going to go to Holly, and then we're going to transition to our next agenda item.
So as we move forward, really important to consider that technology changes. And I don't remember if that was in the list, but what micromobility looks like now is maybe not what it's going to look like in 20 years. And batteries are really changing things.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to transition to Emily to lead us through a presentation on potential community benefits and mobility and accessibility. When Emily concludes her presentation, we're then going to move immediately into our breakout groups. So please stay tuned for more logistics on that. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you. Okay, so to set the framing for our small group discussions today, we wanted to bring back some of the recommendations that you all had put forward kind of in our first few meetings where we were doing the visioning work. As you recall, there were some recommendations in all of the categories that we needed to pull out because they were time sensitive, and we voted on those. But there were still some others that maybe didn't fall into that batch, but were within each of the categories. So all the ones that I'm going to show you come from that list that came from all of you, and we're bringing back to bring forward into these small group discussions and build upon, refine, and add more to it. So what we have so far to start our conversations with are conduct a comparative analysis of the program area to optimize traffic flow, accessibility, and design aesthetics, provide shelters, water, and bathrooms for different users with a focus on those using paths for both recreation and essential travel, improve wayfinding signage in Vancouver to better aid navigation, focusing on the needs of two key user groups, those using paths for leisure and exercise, those using routes out of necessity, including business travel and people experiencing homelessness. Consider having multilingual brown signage to mark areas of interest, national and recreational sites, and important cultural places, such as Vanport. Incorporate a bus rapid transit system into the program plan. Create interconnected greenways and trails connecting downtowns for cyclists, bikers, and walkers. Include an elevator in the bridge design to ensure accessibility for all users. Create efficient public transit from downtown Vancouver to key locations, integrating design elements to improve user experience. And finally, transit planning for those living within 5 to 10 miles of the program area to preserve jobs in the area. So just as a little bit of framing before I turn it back to Bree for logistics. So for these conversations, we don't necessarily want to focus too much on wordsmithing. We really just want to vision out and bring new ideas. So we know that there are some unanswered questions and things that we don't know yet around timing and cost. We really encourage you not to be too constrained by that at this point. We just really want to do this visioning work, and we'll do the refinement at that next stage. So with that, I will turn it back to Bree. Oh, and I'm sorry, one more thing. On your handouts, you have a list of all of these ones I just presented, as well as the ones in this category that you all voted in that previous stage. So that way you can see for reference what we've already put forward, and there's not duplication and things like that. Thank you.
Bree, before you start, we have a small enough group. I don't know if it would make any sense to have breakouts of this group.
It's 5 and 4, so we're gonna do breakouts for this group, because it's not a long time, and that way we make sure everyone's got space to talk. So online, I'll move you into your breakout rooms here. In person, our breakout rooms will have Salome and Fabiola, who will facilitate and note take. Mayor, you'll be with Walter, Greg, Janie, and Marcus in that group. Yamaya will facilitate with Fabian here, and Eric, Carly, Ray, and Holly, you'll be in that group. And I will go ahead and move our virtual folks to your breakout rooms.
We have until 11:15, everybody, and then we'll come back here to do our large group report. There we go. And some others. Like what? Like good. Yeah. 30. Great. How are you? Probably should ask them to move. Over there.
It's been a very. Mine's, yeah. It's like a. I'm glad. So, yeah, I think.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. We are going to get started with our large group report out. So please, every group, select a volunteer who is going to provide about 2 to 3 points that really resonated with your group. We're going to have about 1 to 2 minutes for each group. Emily is going to lead us through the virtual groups first, and we're going to start with those who were in Lucy's group. And then after we wrap up with our virtuals, we'll move to in-person, and then Jonelle will wrap us up and lead us through our next steps. So Emily, can you please get us started?
Yes, so let's go ahead and kick off with Lucy's group. Did you have a volunteer who's going to report out the takeaways?
Hi everyone, I'm representing Lucy's group. Jasmine Tolbert here. And our group, we had really good discussion, really great discussion. Everyone really felt committed to the conversation, which was nice. We discussed many different things when it comes to really the trails and whatnot that would be organized. So we talked about all types of cyclists. We talked about our commuter cyclists. We talked about our recreational cyclists and even our e-cyclists, and talking about what access looks like for all 3 of those groups, and also acknowledging that we in that specific space may not be the subject matter experts on some of these items. So it's important that when we look at finalizing plans and whatnot, that we are engaging and having maybe some final write-off by those that are experts in the accessibility and biking and whatnot spaces. We talked about things like what different lanes would look like in this space. We talked about what signage would look like. And when we talked about signage, we really wanted to ensure that the signage that we are hoping for, perhaps like on the Vancouver side, is also duplicated over on the Portland side and whatnot. And we also talked about how we want these things done and we want these things reviewed, but we also want language put in that requires us to go back and review after some use, because you know, we've all launched something and then found out, oh no, we need this too. So we want to make sure that we capture those items. Outside of that, yeah, a lot of conversations about accessibility to different resources as well, like when it comes to the restroom resources and different food resources that might need to be out there, water, things of that nature, and just talking through how that's going to interact with the other folks that will be accessing the trails, and just making sure that it's accessible on resources, and then obviously physically accessible for multiple different types of participants. So yeah, and I also told my group that if I missed a bullet point or anything like that, they are welcome to join in. But for now, that is my high-level summary.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Jonelle, do we have a volunteer from your group to report out?
We don't, but I'll ask Brenda, who graciously took our notes, to give a quick overview. Brenda?
Hi, everyone. Thank you. A great conversation, a host of focus on making sure that there's representation, especially from the visual, the community, visual needs and disabled needs, as making sure that a lot of discussion around elevators and accessibility and ensuring that's available, as well as the signage and for both pathways for both the Portland side and the Vancouver side, as well as great examples given by those participating and a commitment to further conversations regarding different options for elevators and for accessibility, and really to ensure that those with the greatest needs are brought at these tables to participate in the conversations. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Brenda. Anything from our group of anything we didn't highlight? One additional point I'll make that was brought up is the reminder that the process is part of the outcome, that it's really important, particularly as these facilities are being designed, that we're working with folks with lived experience, particularly, you know, architects, engineers with lived experience of experiencing disability to be engaged in our discussions, because they'll be coming at it with a different perspective. So that was another thing that was highlighted.
Great, thank you so much. And then for our group is the last virtual group. Farley, I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you be comfortable? Okay.
I'm good. Yeah, sorry. I couldn't respond because the chat's disabled for me, but yes, I can share. So yeah, we also had a really great discussion. I thought we talked, I know the focus wasn't on language in the slides, but we talked about the specifics of language. So the elevator being a very specific solution, but more broadly looking for inclusive design, and inclusive design doesn't always mean that the elevator is the option. Ideally, people have a shared pathway. It's not that people with disabilities or mobility issues are put over to one side, but there's a common path that the majority of users are using. Similarly, we talked about signage, and Vicky had the request that we use the brown signage. And I think kind of overall, we were trying to follow regional standards, and that areas of interest are specifically called out. We talked about the texture of pathways and how that can help with mobility, and also trip hazards, curb edges, that, yeah, you can do a lot with the texture of the surface that people are moving across. We talked about how challenging the current edges on the bridge are. So the mobility path right now for bikes and pedestrians has very abrupt edges between fast moving traffic and the cliff edge that is the side of the bridge. And so making sure that there's ample space for people who are walking and biking, having a low speed and a high speed pathway. We talked a little bit about electric bikes and faster moving non-car vehicles that might be using those, and how those mix with each other, making sure that there's space for passing each other or pulling to one side. We also talked about making sure that there's eyes on the pathways. So if bikes and pedestrians are separate from vehicles, that there's enough people in that area that you don't have an isolated encounter that's going to feel unsafe. We cited that the current tunnel underneath the I-5 bridge is incredibly sketchy. There's poor lighting, it's dark, there's no eyes on it, and making sure we want to avoid that situation. And then we also talked about the importance of having direct pathways. And so when you're looking at a plan, it might be easy to say, oh, it's only 3 turns to get from point A to point B. But if you have limited mobility, if you're on a bicycle, if you're having trouble with wayfinding, all those extra turns can really create a negative experience or mean that you don't get to your destination. And so making sure that we have direct pathways that are logical and clearly marked is super important. And feel free to jump in if anybody else on my team has comments I missed.
That was really great. You captured it really well. I think the only thing I would add was the point that other groups made around making sure that we, you know, have experts around accessibility or for folks with disabilities around the table, and especially around design conversations and things like that. We really emphasized that a lot at the beginning of our conversation. And so we were on the same page with other folks as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Bree for the in-person groups.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, we are getting very close to time, so I'm going to ask folks to try and keep their comments to about a minute. Let's start with folks who were in Fabiola and Salome's group.
Oh.
I didn't catch everybody.
Okay, a minute, yikes. to just talk about maybe something that hasn't already been mentioned. The multi-use path on the bridge is something that is going to have multiple, it's going to be not just for transportation, but also it will have touristic value. We almost, as City Manager Holmes said, need to think of it as a long park. But if you're going to have, it needs to be designed so that, as stated earlier, multiple users can use it. People in motorized wheelchairs, people in regular wheelchairs, e-scooters, e-bikes, bikes, peds, not just, we really can't think of it just as bicycles and peds. It's more than that. And so the tricky thing being with the professionals is how to translate all those needs into design standards for the people in Greg's group who are actually having to do the work, so that we aren't leaving these users out. And I mean, right now, the corkscrew, I'm pretty sure you can't get up it in a motorized scooter or a motorized wheelchair. They just don't have the poop, if you will. So that's just like a on the ground. We talked about a whole lot of other things. A little bit of concern about just the stipulation, consideration for cost analysis for financial and feasible implementation. I think it's important not to use people who are using this multimodal path. Think of us as less than somebody in a motorized item. Okay, we could go on, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay, and then we're going to move to those who were in Greg's group.
I'll jump in and take care of it. Many of the things have been discussed. The ramp is a huge issue for us. Bicycles coming down, people walking up. We want to rethink that opportunity. We also talked about art. We also talked about graffiti. How do we prevent or use plants or whatever? Whether it's elevators or bathrooms, where are they going to be, and the maintenance, the cost and cost and cost of all of the maintenance. Where is it going? We had the discussion of putting some of that cost into the tolling. So bathrooms unsupervised become a problem. Shelters unsupervised become a problem, but also maintenance is not on our conversational list right now. So we know it needs to be, as you're designing it, we want to make sure we're able to keep it as beautiful as it is from day one. So how do we pay for everything if it's not well cared for?
I think the other piece of that is how do you keep in mind the sense of tolling, having this link to sort of outcomes that allow for tolls to be collected, which can sometimes exclude the concept of bike ped, and then how has that been flexibly used in other places versus not? So we can start to identify what we carve in and carve out and talk about partnerships around some of that. Because I mean, part of this is the DOTs aren't great at graffiti management, are we? No. We try, but it's rough.
No, but it's a low priority, but it's a huge issue for the people who are using this.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to move it to Jonelle to wrap us up and talk about next steps.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you, everyone, for a very robust discussion as always. What a terrific group we have here. Just a little foreshadow in terms of meetings to come. Our next Community Benefits Advisory Group meeting will occur on May 23rd at the Portland Building. We'll delve into community benefits. June 27th will be again at the Portland Building. We'll brainstorm avoid further harm. Then on July 25th, we'll be back at the IBR office discussing physical design. August 22nd, we'll review and refine the thoughts after it's gone through our technical review on mobility and accessibility. Next slide, please. In terms of other advisory groups that are meeting, May 20th, 5:30 to 7:30, we have the Equity Advisory Group. And then May 23rd, as indicated, we have 9:30 to 11:30, the Community Benefits Advisory Group. Next slide. Steve? See a hand raise.
Yes, sorry. I will let you finish. I have a brief thought at the very end, and I apologize. I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand.
Okay, no problem. Go ahead and do it now.
I will say at the beginning of the meeting, I understand public, and I hope my camera is on. I can't see it, but I think it is. Public comment is the public and public's opinion, but I believe a shot was taken at Greg that I feel was out of bounds. Greg, when he talks about issues with the tunnel, my people, the Cowlitz Indian tribe, is opposed to the tunnel because of impacts it will have on fish and fish species in the Columbia River. And I believe Greg was called out a little bit more than Greg should have been called out. There's a professional call out, and then there's impugning somebody's honesty. And I just felt necessary to say that Greg has been nothing but honest and straightforward with me. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, Steve. Want to thank everyone for participation and turn over to Greg for final remarks.
First off, thank you, Steve, for that comment. The seat sometimes takes a lot of slings and arrows, but we're going to move forward in a very open way with everyone and anyone. So thank you for that comment. I just wanted to reinforce the importance of what we're doing here. The conversations that we had in our group about some things that our designers need to make sure that they are taking into account. This is the importance of a group like this. So thank you for your time and input, and these things are taken seriously. I'm gonna task someone from our team to start interacting with the Transportation Research Board to start looking into some of these issues that maybe on a national and even international stage, how they have been handled in other places. So great conversation.
Thank you
Great.
so much, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you all. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Greg.